Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I like to discuss a report and the Tory and Reform UK reaction to the report on Generation Z feeling less of a connection with their country than older generations, largely because of the level of racism directed at them. Badenoch and Farage have predictably decided that this is not the fault of racists, but the fault of young people for noticing the racism. If only they would ignore it, it would all be fine. But first, for daily political commentary, please hit the subscribe button to stay notified. So the Times have been reporting on a survey, large survey into attitudes amongst Generation Z. One standout result is that in 2004, after 7 years of a Labour government, 80% of people aged 18 to 30, roughly the same group as they were at the time, not anymore, said that they were proud to be British. After 14 years of a Tory government in 2024, only 41% of 18 to 27-year-olds said the same. The article points to the problems of racism in particular for this disconnect between Generation Z and their country, where only about 10% said they were willing to fight for it. A recent former head of the British Army was quoted as saying that if people aren't prepared to fight for freedom, we will become prey in a world of predators. He said there must be a concerted effort to change attitudes. Which is absolutely correct, depending on what you mean, because the statement's ambiguous. So which attitudes do we need to change? See, you read this report and you inevitably draw the conclusion that the attitudes we need to change are those of the racists. We need to promote unity, harmony, tolerance. But some have decided to read this article and decide that the problem is not racism in society, but the attitude of the people victim to racism. That they should just stop pointing out all the racism, making a fuss, and everything would be fine. But how does that work? Because you think, I think in my life, I've maybe had one experience of prejudice in my life in the community. And it was like a one-off, didn't exactly scar me or ruin my life. When I was about 20, I think, I was home from uni for the holidays. So I would go to the judo club of a Saturday afternoon, then walk into town, get the bus back after a little wander around. So on this particular day, my sister, who was also doing a science degree, but ecology, not physics, needed some syringes for her soil testing. My mum told me, the ones you get for baby kits, like for medicines and stuff, they're fine. Just go and get one of those, would you? And I thought, okay, I'll pick some up. So after my judo class, I go to Boots, have a look around, can't find them. So I asked someone. They tried to direct me to the needle exchange. I said, I'm not a drug addict. I need them for science. They weren't impressed, so off I went. So then I tried a second chemist and I thought, right, okay, I need to explain the science bit first before they jump to conclusions. That didn't work either. So I went to a third chemist, I went in the full thing about soil samples and my sister before even mentioning the product I wanted. All to no avail. They all kept trying to direct me to the needle exchange. So I went back, reported my failure to my mum, my sister. My mum went into town herself the following Monday, went into Boots, asked for them, got them, no problems at all. But I think that's my only brush with prejudice out in the community in my entire life. Certainly nothing else comes to mind. I mean, I've encountered prejudice in more closed settings, but you could just leave them. Not encountered anything like this, other than that one time, in the community where there's no way of avoiding it. Where it does ruin your life and it does create a disconnect. And, for me, that's just a silly story. But what about for people who get this all the time? Being stopped in shops to check they're not stealing, stopped in the street by police, where a white person would need to be literally juggling knives before the police even think about it. So you think, you try to think what it must be like for these people. So they don't have a perception of racism. They're seeing actual racism. They're either the victims of it themselves, or they're seeing their friends subjected to racism. They've been stopped in the shops regularly. An experience someone like me has never experienced even once, much less multiple times. They're seeing others who aren't white being stopped for the same reason. They don't see white folk getting stopped by the same treatment. They're talking with their white friends. The white friends go, do you get stopped? I don't get stopped. Someone tells you they can't be your friend specifically because of the colour of your skin. So you go, so you're being open about it. You're going to treat me differently because of the colour of my skin. So that's racist, right? And if you get that regularly, that's not a person. Like if you come across these things as a one-off, even every few years, it's like I just came across a dickhead, right? But when it's happening all the time, it's like, no, there's something about society that's racist. It's not just a perception. you're experiencing it, and it's real. As one guy featuring the report said, like, for most, it's not necessarily conscious racism, it's systemic. It's not necessarily deliberate on the part of the most people, but it is there. But if you're experiencing this, it is real. You know it's real. You know you're a victim. You know you're specifically a victim of racism because you're being targeted explicitly because of the colour of your skin. And so it's undeniably racism. And you see it from more than just one or two people, so it's widespread in your community. So, of course, you know this racism in society. It's real. So now imagine you're living that life. And then you see people at the top of politics saying, racism isn't real. It's just a perception. When Boris Johnson was Prime Minister, he took receipt of a government-commissioned report into institutional racism in Britain. Then he edited out all the references, he got his Sharpie out, edited out all the references to racism, doctored the conclusion to say, oh yeah, there's no real institutional racism in Britain. There's the odd little racists, we ignore them. This is the Prime Minister, the head of government. So you're this person who sees that racism is very much ingrained in society. Then you see the authors of a report into racism tell the press that the Prime Minister edited their report to claim there's no such thing as institutional racism in Britain. Of course, you're going to think there's something fundamentally wrong with your country. It's one thing to have racists. It's another to have a government that doesn't even try to tackle it. Worse, that even promotes it. Johnson promoted racist tropes. Even the Tories in opposition now, led by Badenoch and Jenrick, have been saying the problem here isn't racism. They're not saying, oh, it's terrible, we need to do something about this racism these people are experiencing. No. They're saying, oh, it's false perceptions driven by the media. How is it a false perception driven by the media if someone tells you to your face they're going to treat you worse because of the colour of your skin? How is it a perception driven by the media if you're constantly getting stopped in the shops to check you're not stealing, but you talk to your white friends and say, does this happen to you? And they go, no, it doesn't happen to me. But these people don't think their country is racist because they read it in the woke Marxist Times or something. It's because it's happening to them or it's happening to their friends. They're experiencing it or hearing of experiences from people close to them. You know, if you want to tackle this disconnect between Generation Z and the country, you have to attack the racists, not the people calling out the racism. And it doesn't surprise me that this is particularly happening with Generation Z because, and I've said this before, when I was growing up, I sort of saw the reverse of what Generation Z has seen. See, when I was very young, racism was on the telly. It was open. You had racist comedians, your Bernard Manning types. They were mainstream. Oh, it's just jokes. And you got a sense of humour and racist language. And what I saw, particularly through the 90s, is there was a move against it. There was a conscious move against it. I think it must have come from the government, even though it was a Conservative government at the time, against this sort of racism. They disappeared off the screens, off the television. They had to go and do things. They could do things privately. They could go and do clubs or stuff, but they weren't going to be on the television. And Britain became much more tolerant. And then about 10 years ago, a bit over 10 years ago, it started to go into reverse. And we started to see there were things that are said now that Nigel Farage will say, Kemi Badenoch will say, Robert Jenrick will say, that they wouldn't have said 10 years, those same people would not have said openly 10 years ago. People like that have now moved us back. And Generation Z have grown up observing that. They've seen, not as I saw, they didn't see racism being kicked into the dark corners. They saw it being brought out into the light again. So it doesn't surprise me that Generation Z have this attitude. You know, you should attack those who are dividing them from the rest of society, not those who are pointing it out. This is basically victim blaming. And what makes this particularly maddening is that Badenoch and Jenrick and Farage are all going there's no such thing as racism in Britain. And yet, all three of them were claiming that there was institutional racism in Britain just last summer. Only they were trying to claim it was the other way around, that police, for example, were racist against white people, despite the very obvious statistical evidence pointing to the contrary. It was their entire basis for their attacks on two-tier policing. Can they make their minds up? You can't say Britain is racist in summer and not in winter. It's one or the other. I mean, it'd be nice if they told the truth, but if they insist on lying, can they at least be consistent with the lie? And obviously this sort of attitude isn't going to endear them to Generation Z. It's less of a problem for Reform UK, I guess, because they're mostly interested in that racist vote in that age group and are outpacing the Conservatives for support, right? So they're winning first past the post system, at least amongst the Conservatives. But the Conservatives are doing nothing to win over a generation which is about to be slightly expanded when Labour introduce votes for 16 and 17-year-olds later this year. Remember, the Conservatives don't have a majority of support in any age group right now. Since the election, Labour have lost a lot amongst the older generation, for obvious reasons. But it's Reform UK in the lead there. They're the ones who gained from that. It's not any clearer to me how the Tories aim to win back support when they seem to be systematically offending all demographics. So they're telling young victims of racism or friends of victims of racism that the racism that's blighting their life or the friend's life doesn't exist. They're telling elderly pensioners that the state pension's too generous, needs to be means tested. And they're telling everyone in between that they're going to cancel a load of their employment rights as soon as they come back to power. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. If you've enjoyed the video, please click the like button and subscribe for further content. If you'd like to support the channel further, you can click the join button for memberships. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.